Hi everyone, we're going to continue with Paul in Athens, and this particular segment is going to focus on how Athenian men perceived women in Athens, what they thought about them, what the philosophers, what their view of women were, which transcended to all of Greece because the streets were filled with Epicureans and Stoics and atheists, and these people were just filled to the brim with philosophy. Okay, it's almost like none of them had any concept of their own. They were looking to weave like a patch quilt, something that this philosopher said and that philosopher said. So we're going to look at the role of women in Athens and how the men perceived the women. Okay? All right, since few women in the ancient world knew how to read or write, most of our information about their life comes to us filtered through the eyes of men. This is particularly problematic in the case of Greece, for Athenian men claim to have a fairly low opinion of women. How much of that was little more than jocks blowing in the wind as they tried to score points with one another in the perpetual battle of the sexes, and how much of it was characterized deeply held views representative of all corners of society? In any event, here are some of the examples of what they said. Aristotle said that man is by nature superior to the female, and so the man should rule and the woman should be ruled. Demosthenes wrote, quotes, "We keep heterae," it's spelled Heterae, heterae, for the sake of pleasure. Now, heterae is that women are considered prostitutes, and there are many different descriptions of a prostitute, and they're all, how can I say, there's different descriptions, but they're all lowly. It just depends. It's like a slave that you have either to do this, or a slave that you have to do that, or a slave that you have to do this. You would consider them all prostitutes, but they would all have a different function. That's what that word means. He said, "We keep heterae for the sake of pleasure, female slaves for our daily care, and wives to give us legitimate children and to be the guardians of our households." A man who teaches a woman to write should know that he is providing poison to an ASP, whatever that is. I don't know what ASP is. Euripides has women characters make disparaging remarks about their sex. A, "I am only a woman, a thing which the world hates." B, "No cure has been found for a woman's venom, worse than that of reptiles. We are a curse to man." And C, "Men of sense should never let gossiping women visit their wives, for they work mischief." Hipponax, whose writing is quite abusive anyway, had this to say about women: "There are 2 days on which a woman is most pleasing: when someone marries her and when he carries out her dead body." This aphorism probably should be ignored, coming as it does from a 6th century BCE Ephesian whose malicious temperament left him with a few friends in the land of his birth, and very little good to say about anyone. But the remark is quoted too often today to be left out. So that's what that writer had said. Hyperides said, a woman who travels outside of her house should be old enough that people ask whose mother she is, not whose wife she is. And this next one says, in his funeral speech, Pericles says, a woman's reputation is highest when men say little about her, whether it be good or evil. Now, these are the men that the Athenians looked up to. These are like, Socrates and all the philosophers and the poets. These are the statements. This is the low level. Women were less than a pet, if you can imagine that. So this was the consensus in Greece and how men viewed women. Creation stories tell us a great deal about society's view of itself and the world around. In Judeo-Christian version of Adam, man was the first human, and God fashioned Eve, woman, to be his companion. After the serpent successfully urged her to eat forbidden fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, she tempted her husband to do the same. And when God caught them both, are driven out of the Garden of Eden into a world of sorrow and hard work. Note that men and women sprang from the same source material, and while her creation was an afterthought on God's part, it was done as a favor to man, and that while woman was the tempter, man was willing to participate in the crime that led to their expulsion from Eden. So this is Judeo-Christian, blame the woman for our state, our sinful state. Okay? Now, the Greek story is quite different. This is the way the Greeks view it. The first woman was Pandora, was created as a form of punishment because men had learned from Prometheus the secret of making fire. How or from what man was created was never mentioned. But Pandora was fashioned out of the earth by Hephaestus on orders from Zeus. The various gods and goddesses supplying the attributes of women. Anything visible was beautiful and designed to make her irresistible to men. But all of the hidden characteristics, the ones that made her true personality, were deliberately intended to bring sorrow, harm, and trouble to man. It was not a pretty picture. The epic poem, The Odyssey, features a number of prominent women, only one of whom was mortal. The others were nymphs, immortal beings with much power, but a status lower than that of a goddess. They varied in personality and attractiveness, but they had the potential to do enormous damage to any man that they met. The nymph Charybdis, 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 had been turned into a whirlpool that sucked in water and blew it back up, destroying any ship that tried to pass by. The nymph Scylla, the 6 heads and 18 rows of teeth, ate 6 of Odysseus' sailors. Sirens tempted men with their seductive song and then lured them to their death on the beach. When Circe, C-I-R-C-E, Circe drugged men and turned them into pigs, Hermes supplied Odysseus with the antidote, and he searched the island to find his men. Later, the nymph Calypso kept Odysseus a prisoner on her island for 7 years while she tried to persuade him to marry her, letting him go only after the gods finally convinced her he would never be a willing companion. Sue Blundell said that these women have the power to engulf and obliterate men if they become too closely involved with them. That this engulfment is of a sexual nature, is an impression evoked by the symbols of the yawning chasm and the man-eating monster. The Hippocratic writers believed that men and women were different, in that the latter had flesh that is more porous and softer, and that it drew moisture faster and in greater quantities from the belly than did men. This is ridiculous. Menstruation was nature's way of getting rid of this excess. See, they didn't know anything about a woman's anatomy or anything like that. They knew nothing about gynecology or how the anatomy functioned or the reason that menstruation was there in the first place. So this is what they thought. Only Aristotle saw that they were essentially the same animal. The woman, he said, was simply an inferior sort of man. It seems clear then that Athenians saw women as beguiling creatures capable of causing considerable harm to themselves and others, and weaker in mind and body than men. Many believed that young girls were somewhat wild and difficult to control, and the virgins were subject to hallucinations that could encourage them to be self-destructive. The solution was an early marriage, for only after a woman had delivered her first baby could she be a fully operational female. Let's see, health. Woman's health, a Greek approach to woman's illness, pregnancy, and childbirth. It is tempting to credit the medicine we are taking when an illness is cleared up, forgetting that the condition might have gone away by itself regardless of what we did. What this is trying to say is when we get a pain or this or that, we run to the CVS immediately, and if we just waited a little bit, maybe it would have healed on its own. This is undoubtedly the key to the popularity, even today, of so many folk medicines that researchers insist do nothing at all except make money for the manufacturers. And there were certainly many medical procedures in the ancient world that did very little good and some that did considerable harm. We can put ancient world remedies on our ladder of scientific achievement, giggle at the silly things they tried, and take pride in the miracles we work today. Nevertheless, some very exciting things were happening in ancient Greece. We can track the movement away from the supernatural towards a desire to understand anatomy and the workings of the human body. Athenians took justifiable pride in their desire to draw conclusions based on empirical evidence rather than chance or supernatural intervention. But when it came to the medical condition of women, their political and social philosophy often got in the way of anatomy. Those poor women. The remainder of this synopsis, I guess I would call it, about the health of women can be found in the writings of ancient Greeks. In most cases, there's no comment here on whether the ideas were right or wrong, but for you to consider the following 4 questions as you go through each one of these sections. So basically, number 1, does it appeal to an external supernatural force? Is it based on an attempt, however faulty, to understand anatomy? Could it work? And 4, how much is it influenced by women's political and social position in society? Okay, this is the first category, is general. The time in a young woman's life between puberty and loss of virginity was thought to be particularly dangerous. Early marriage was the only cure, as sexual intercourse would open the entrance to the womb, allowing blood flow out so it could not back up into the lungs and heart, where it would cause licentiousness and dangerous hallucinations. The womb, as if it had a life of its own, was so anxious to become pregnant that it could wander around inside a woman's body, causing her all manner of ill health. Since sexual intercourse was the only cure, early marriage was thought to be essential to a girl's health. Now we get to menstruation. Hippocrates believed that a woman's flesh was warmer and softer than that of a man, and that its sponge-like character allowed it to absorb excess blood to the point of pain. Menstruation permits the surplus to dissipate. Giving birth stretches the blood vessels and allows it to flow more freely, relieving the menstrual pain felt by some women who have never been pregnant. Since men have firmer flesh and work harder than they do not need menstruation to allay pain. Basically, they're saying that they have real pain. Those women with a heavy menstrual flow lasting more than 4 days were thought to be delicate and to produce delicate embryos, while women with a light flow lasting fewer than 3 days were believed to be healthy and robust, but masculine in appearance and uninterested in having children. Here we go on to conception now. One test of a woman's fertility involved burning incense under her cloak. If the scent passed through to her mouth, it meant that her body was sufficiently hollow, receptive to sperm, and ready to conceive. These were supposed to be some of the most intelligent philosophers in the world. Do you believe this stuff? Almost everyone believed that the only proper behavior for the daughter of a citizen was to marry as soon after puberty as possible, get pregnant, and raise children. Failure to conceive was thus a serious problem. Many sought help by appealing to a god or a goddess. A particularly popular treatment involved sleeping in a dormitory in Epidaurus, where the god of Asclepius would induce dreams to heal the inner body. Others sought to find and repair some condition in the body that was preventing pregnancy. Having no knowledge of ovaries, they assumed the problem must lie in the inability of the semen to reach inside of the womb. Cures sought to soften and thus open the entrance to the uterus. While they may have come up with the wrong answer, they were the first to attempt to solve the problem by looking at the inner workings of the body. Although Aristotle believed that pregnancy resulted when semen and menstrual blood mixed in the womb, he downplayed the woman's role to little but a secure environment in which the fetus could grow. Most other Greek writers believed in more equal contribution by the father and the mother, but they were unaware of the ovaries and therefore could speak only in philosophic terms. Women who are too fat will have difficulty conceiving because the fat will block the entrance to the womb. Their only hope for pregnancy is to lose weight. The pregnant woman with good color will deliver a male baby. If the mother's color is bad, the child will be a girl. Here's contraception. There is very little direct evidence of contraception in ancient Greece, but families did tend to be small. Daughters needed dowries, and sons divided their father's estate equally, so there was an incentive to limit the number of children, but we do not know how this was accomplished. Abortion plus the exposure of unwanted babies may have been enough. The Hippocratic Oath included a vow not to give a pessary to cause an abortion, but Hippocratic writings include other prescriptions to accomplish the same end. So basically, the Hippocratic Oath was there to not encourage, not to actually do the abortion, but there were drugs and procedures that could abort the baby. How ridiculous. The ends justifies the means, right? A number of herbs were known at this time to prevent conception or abort an early stage fetus. The Pythagoreans were the only ones to openly oppose abortion on moral grounds. And now we go to miscarriage. When a woman is pregnant, some of her blood enters the womb to surround and nourish the fetus. If her womb gapes open, there will be some bleeding. This is a sign that the woman needs special care to prevent a miscarriage. Aristotle wrote about women suffering from sicknesses in early stages of pregnancy, which he said would be worse if the baby was a girl. There were danger signs to watch for. Diarrhea signaled potential trouble in the pregnant woman. If her breasts suddenly lose their fullness, she will miscarry. If she is carrying twins and the right breast loses its fullness, she will lose a male child. If the left, then the female. A woman's physical condition will affect her chances of delivering a healthy baby. If she is too thin or in poor physical shape, she will have a good chance of miscarrying. Heavy lifting, improper diet, and beating and jumping up and down can also cause a miscarriage. Doctors should not bleed a pregnant woman, as this can produce a miscarriage, especially if the fetus is large. If the inside of the womb is too smooth, a miscarriage may result simply because there is nothing to keep the baby from sliding out. Now we go to delivery. Unless there were serious complications, babies were delivered by midwives, not physicians. Delivery was usually in a sitting position on a birthing stool. If the baby was overdue, there were herbs available to induce delivery. Although one doctor described how he had 4 woman assistants violently shake his patient in order to speed up the delivery. That is all I'm going to read to you about women's health and men's opinions regarding women. You can understand why the Apostle Paul wrote about Your righteousness is as filthy rags. This was at the root of his statement. And I could prove it because I have more information here about the women in Athens and how they were treated, not only by the Jews, not only by the Greeks, not only by the Muslims, but everywhere. That's why Jesus helped those women in the Bible. That's why he healed the woman of 12 years of bleeding. That's why he so eagerly spoke to the woman that offered him, gave him a drink of water from the well. And that's why women prayed with Jesus and the apostles. They didn't separate themselves. All of this was due to men, misogyny. And I'm going to bring you more on this subject, but I'm also, I think, like 26 minutes in. So right now, this will be the end of how men viewed, Athenian men viewed women. And I will be back to talk about women, how they were viewed as far as their levels of prostitution in Athens. God bless you.